Hey everybody, welcome to your horoscopes for the week. These are the horoscopes for the week ending April 22nd. Yes, April 22nd. We officially move into Mercury retrograde this week, unfortunately. On the 21st, we are officially in the shadow period this whole week of that retrograde as well. So it'll probably be playing out in some way, shape, or form um this week as well. So you definitely want to be mindful of that. It is a full Taurus retrograde. So of course Tauruses are going to be directly affected by it because it is in your sign. And any planets that are interacting with it in other signs will be affected by it as well. But even if you don't have planets in your sign that is going to be affected, like for instance Leo all the way through Sagittarius, there's no planets influencing your signs at all this week. Doesn't mean that you're not going to be affected by that Mercury retrograde in some way, shape, or form, just maybe not as much as others. So let's go ahead and get started. We always get started, of course, with Aries, and we are officially ending Aries season this week as well. We have right up until about Wednesday, and then Thursday the sun moves into Taurus as well. So you probably had a fantastic party, guys, because I know my Aries friends, they really do know how to party. But it's time to get back into something a little bit more serious in terms of your focus. We do continue to have Jupiter in Aries as well. The sun and Jupiter will all, and the moon actually, because we are not so much kicking off the week with the moon in your sign, but the moon will be moving into your sign about Monday, Tuesday. All three of these planets move into a square with Pluto. All of your focus is on your career. Pluto's focus is on relationships. It's actually a very interesting combination here. And of course, when we add the moon's influence to it, it becomes a very emotional type of influence as well, which is a little bit on the tricky side there. So first things first, Pluto is all about transformation. It's all about change. It's your source of personal power in many ways. Having an issue with Pluto, especially when this is influencing your relationships, can be really heavy for a couple of reasons. One, this is going to play out in terms of your relationships, as in your personal relationships, are influencing, getting in the way of you actually being able to achieve those career goals. And this might add a bit of a layer of frustration to that. The other way that this may play out a little bit is that you may actually not be creating the correct relationships that you need within your professional relationship. So these relationships, they may look on the surface like they're helping you, but there might be some ulterior motives there as well. And this lineup is going to happen all week long, right into that Mercury retrograde space. So a couple of things for you guys in terms of advice on how to navigate through that a little bit. First of all, if it's your personal relationships that are really just getting in the way of your career goals, like for instance, you're focused, you're ready to move forward, but you have a friend or a family member that is just really, really, really bugging for your time over and over and over again, and it's taking your focus away from your goals, you need some clear boundaries on that. The thing is that whether it's a family relationship, a friend relationship, regardless of what it is, a lot of times people will go through their own stuff and they're not thinking about the fact that they may be getting in the way of something that you're working on right now. They're too busy focused on themselves and their own problem. It doesn't make them bad people or anything like that. It just, think about it. When you get emotional, you're not thinking of anybody else. You're thinking of you and how to solve your problem, or how to have somebody listen to you and what you need. we all kind of go through it. So you can't really blame them for being like that, but you can lay down some clear boundaries, or you can explain to them calmly, preferably, I'm right in the middle of something right now. I have this time that we can get together and talk about this. I just can't talk about it right now. And of course, if you do, we are going through a Mercury retrograde starting at the end of this week. We're in the shadow period this week. So you really want to be clear on your communication to make sure that there's no wrong way that that can be taken. And then that way you don't inadvertently cause a bigger problem. In terms of your professional relationships and the possibility that somebody is actually your friend when they're not your friend, this can get really, really complicated because it can really hurt bad when you find out the truth about this relationship. And there's a lot of people out there in the world that really good at playing your friend when your intuition and your gut is saying there's something off about this relationship. So my best advice is to be open and aware of what is going on here so that you can put some boundaries on that relationship as well. You want to make sure that your professional connections are helping you move forward in your goals and not in some way holding you back from achieving your goals. And you will be able to tell the red flags because these people generally have a lot of fear-based ideas. So if, for instance, you're talking about, I want to get this promotion, and you're talking to somebody at work who seems like your friend, and they're like, well, I mean, the promotion sounds good, but do you really want that promotion? I hear you have to work with so-and-so, and that's not, no one likes to work with so-and-so. I hear you're going to have to work more hours. And then they convince you that maybe you don't want that promotion. The next thing you know, that person has that job. That's what you want to avoid. So this is what I'm talking about, of being aware of the red flags. If it seems like this person isn't really 100% on board with what you're doing because of the underlying things that they're saying, you might want to question that relationship, or at least put some separation in between you and that person so that you can move forward. So that's what I have for you guys. If you are enjoying your horoscopes, please leave me a coffee. Check the link below and click that link and you can send me a coffee. Doesn't that sound fun? Moving on to Taurus, we are kicking off Taurus season this week. The sun is moving into Taurus. It's Taurus time, and the Mercury retrograde is starting this week, and it's a full Taurus retrograde. And of course, we still have Uranus in Taurus because that's going to continue on for a while as well, definitely for the rest of the year for sure. I haven't quite looked forward to see if there's any movement yet next week. We'll probably get there closer to the end of the year, if that makes sense. So we've got a Taurus party going on in the middle of a Mercury retrograde, and that is a little bit crazy, but there is some positivity in it. Focus is on those that support you. Mercury and the sun bring a focus of career into the mix as well. We're looking at those that support you in your career goals. And during a Mercury retrograde, that can look like someone is being very supportive, but they may not be as supportive to you and your goals as you think they are. And especially as we get towards the end of the week with the moon coming into your sign, sort of moving in with all of these planets. It's a huge planet party going on at the end of the week, but that adds a layer of emotion to everything that's going on. So I feel there's a couple of things. First of all, let's look at Uranus and Mercury's sextile with Mars. Mars is still focused in that inner trauma place. So we're bringing up old anger. It feels like Mars has been doing this to us all year long. And the truth is that he really has. He's just been stuck in this place. He's changed signs and he's still stuck in this inner trauma focused. And I feel like, as difficult as it is, there's a really good reason for this. We have to identify and let go of as much as of our inner anger as possible, because that inner anger is what makes us second guess every single relationship and every single decision that we make. And especially now, going through a Mercury retrograde, you want to make sure that the people that are there to support you are the right kind of people that are there to support you. A sign like Taurus, and I've known quite a few Tauruses over the years, even been related to a couple of them. One of the things that I've noticed about a lot of Tauruses is that they gather people, they gather friends, they gather all these people around them. It's like they're personal cheerleading squad that they continue to build around them. But there's not much value being put behind why they're choosing these people. They're choosing these people to have people, but that doesn't really work out for you if you need support in something specific that they can't provide. And so unless you've gathered a whole bunch of people around you that can support you in various different aspects of your life, that's the smart way of doing it, by the way, you still wind up in the same position where you feel unsupported. And that is just not a good feeling. And this may be triggering past experiences where you didn't feel supported, which may actually be showing the root as to why you gather so many people around you to support you, if that makes sense. So there's just a lot of stuff, it feels like, that's coming out of this right as the Mercury retrograde starts, which is a little bit unfortunate. Also, talking about a full Taurus Mercury retrograde, we're talking about communication issues, and we're talking about issues with money and finances. And a lot of times, these issues, especially if they're issues that you or communication patterns or financial problems that you've been having issues with for a really long time, you're going to see a lot of that being mirrored back at you, because when it's mirrored back at you, it gives you a better chance of being able to identify where you're doing these things. So for instance, if you are a target for a lot of passive aggressive communication, you might want to look in the mirror there to see if you're using the same form of communication, even though you may not think that you do. Unfortunately, things are usually mirrored back at us for a reason. It's either attached to a root that we need to deal with, or it's attached to ourselves and we need to pay attention to where we may need to fix things a little bit or change things around for ourselves and for our own success, if that makes sense. Passive aggressive communication really is a form of communication that doesn't get anything done. And so we're looking at forms of communication that don't resolve issues and changing that. And we all have that in some way, right? Um, we do have the sun, as the sun is coming into your sign, in a square with Pluto. The moon, as it's coming in your sign, is also in that square. And this is actually very interesting because these two planets at this time are focused on your career, and specifically your career goals, moving forward in your career goals. Pluto is all about transformation. In some cases, it holds your personal power. And Pluto is focused on relationships. So I feel like how this is going to play out for you guys is it can play out in one of a couple of ways, actually. Either you're not feeling supported by your friends and loved ones in terms of what you want to do with your career goals, or you may find that somebody is extremely supportive of you, maybe even a little too supportive. And when people get a little too attached, a little too supportive, a little too, that's always a red flag for me. If they're overdoing it, they're hiding something almost always. So it's really important that you use your intuition. if something feels off about this particular relationship, it might be a good idea to put it on the back burner while you focus on what you need to get done. So that's what I have for you guys this week. If you're enjoying your horoscopes, do please click the link below in the description and send me a copy. And I'm going to move on to Gemini. We continue to have Venus in Gemini, very much focused on your support system. And Venus is luckily in a position where she's not interacting a whole lot with other planets. I mean, she is interacting a little bit. She is in a square with Saturn. But the interaction could be a lot worse. We'll just put it that way. Her square with Saturn, Saturn is focused on responsibility and focused on finances. Venus is all about creativity and very much focusing her energy on your support system. And this is actually very interesting right now because I can really, really, really connect to it in terms of something that I've been going through recently. And that is that it sucks when you don't feel like you're financially supported, especially if you're in a relationship and you're trying to get something to take off and you have that sort of safe space, but then it feels like that person isn't quite on board with your ideas and what you want to do. And that person can be not quite on board with those ideas for a multitude of different reasons. But we always take it as they hate us and they hate our ideas and they just don't want to see us succeed, right? Because it's the emotional place that we take it every single time. And when the moon bumps into Gemini and sort of almost by the end of the day, it probably will, moves into that square with Saturn, this becomes very emotional as it goes from feeling I'm a little irritated by this person not supporting me to it becomes very emotional, as in like maybe you're having a conversation about it and it gets really, really heated and really, really emotional. Two things. One, we are in the middle of a Mercury retrograde right now. And being in the middle of a Mercury retrograde means any kind of bad communication patterns are going to be coming up a lot, right? And they come up a lot in relationships. They come up a lot in marriages. In terms of the way that you communicate that is destructive to the relationship, these things are going to come up a lot. And they're coming up because Mercury is saying, it's time to find a new way to communicate about this so that maybe you can resolve the issue rather than always being in a defensive place, so to speak. I also see this square playing out in terms of, when you're doing something that is quote unquote creative. So if you are Geminis always have like a million ideas. If you're focused on an idea that's going to require a little bit of time to get it going, there's going to be a lot of worry about money and, oh my God, my own responsibility to make money. And what happens if I don't make money? And, oh my God, the whole world could come crashing down. So part of Mercury's retrograde is minding your own self-talk as well, and being mindful that that kind of talk is destructive and it's really not going to help you move forward. In many cases, it's going to make it difficult for you to move forward. So with that being said, that is what I have for you guys. Hey, if you really enjoy your horoscopes, click the link below and send me a copy. I definitely will appreciate it. And we're going to move on to Cancer. Of course, we continue to have Mars in Cancer, and we are focused on our inner trauma. And Mars is focused on our inner trauma also, which adds a very annoying layer to the whole thing. And of course, we're moving into a Mercury retrograde this week. So that just adds another new, very interesting layer to the whole mix. Mars is in a sextile with that Mercury retrograde, as well as Uranus, both planets really focused on your career goals. And what this really tells me is that this is a beautiful opportunity for you to be able to identify where some of your negative mindsets come from. And they almost always come from old anger that you've been holding on to for a really long time. Now, if you're the victim of somebody, which if you have old anger, chances are that is what happened. If you're the victim of somebody else's whatever it is, whether it's abuse, whether it's betrayal, whether it's abandonment, doesn't matter what it is, we get this anger. We get angry in that moment and we hold on to that anger, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as we get older. And a lot of times, this deep-seated frustration is allowing us to tell ourselves that no matter how hard we work, we're never going to be able to move forward in our goals. Releasing that anger helps you to release that mindset, helps you to move forward in those goals. And if you don't get it, you just get back up and you try again, because that's how that works. It's always how that's worked. So in some cases, this is actually working in your favor. And because Mercury is retrograde, Mercury is also reminding you that it's not just about how you communicate to other people. It is all about how you communicate to yourself. And I feel like the emotional signs, like Cancer specifically, have a really bad habit. I mean, all signs have this bad habit, but Cancers really take that negative self-bashing to a whole completely different level. And that genius really can be used in other ways, ways that allow your creativity to come out and allow you to really do something with it. So that is what I have for you guys this week. And hey, if you enjoy your horoscopes, please do me a favor, click the link below in the description and send me a copy. I would really appreciate it. Moving on to Leo, focus is on self this week. There are no planets in Leo. We do continue to have the dark moon's influence in Leo. And the dark moon's influence really is on the past, actually, this week. And while the dark moon is all about making these like major and drastic changes, you really can't change the past. What happened happened. There's nothing you can do about it. But you can change how the past rules your life now. And that's really what the Lilith is all about. You know, she's really about just running through there and busting up all of this mess, making a big, huge mess for you to clean up. But at the same time, it's easier to dismantle a wall by taking the rocks out than it is to actually go in there with a sledgehammer and break the wall down and then pick up the pieces. So in a way, it's kind of like she's doing half the work for you. And I also feel that this is really coming up right now because with focus on self is not just about self-care. It's not about being selfish. A lot of times, for me anyways, focus on self means I have a chance to evaluate who I am, how I do things, whether or not I'm successful. Am I where I want to be right now? What do I need to do to get to where I want to be? How is my personality defects, because we all have them, affecting my ability to get where I need to be right now? This is all really important, and it's a very important part of self-care that a lot of people don't see. Most people go, self-care is about bubble baths, and it's about ice cream when I feel down and I need ice cream, and it's about going and getting a manicure, all these different things. Self-care, yes, is about spoiling yourself. I agree. I love that aspect of self-care, and I'm keeping it. But it's also about self-development. It's about growth. It's about being better than you were yesterday. And if you're still sitting in the same hole that you were yesterday, then you're not getting better than you were yesterday. So the Lilith really is coming in retrograde, sort of bashing that wall down so that it makes it easier for you to eliminate those pieces and harness your inner goddess or god and really do what it is that you set out to do in the first place. So yes, can be a little bit difficult. But at the same time, it's so refreshing to be able to live a life that you never thought in a million years that you could live before. So that's what I have for you guys. And if you're enjoying your horoscopes, please do me a favor, click the link below and send me a coffee. I would really appreciate it. And I'm going to move on to Virgo. Focus continues to be on the mind. Series continues to be in Virgo and it continues to be in retrograde. So we're continuing that nurturing influence mirrored back at ourselves, specifically in terms of how we think. This is very interesting doing this during a Mercury retrograde, because while Mercury is all about bringing up negative communication patterns overall a lot, so that we really can't get away from not dealing with the problem if we have the problem, that's also about our own internal communication as well, and the specific words that we tend to use directed at ourselves. For whatever reason, we are directing that at ourselves. We're still directing that at ourselves, if that makes sense. So in terms of this influence with Ceres in the middle of a Mercury retrograde, I feel like when it comes to nurturing your mind or nurturing how you think, we're also paying very close attention to the words that you use, either directed at yourself in your own self-talk, or the words that you use in here that are technically directed at other people. Now, you all know what I'm talking about, right? When you're in the car and somebody cuts you off and you're saying underneath your breath, you sound like Yosemite Sam, right? You're actually, that communication, whether that person can hear it or not, you're still sending out negative energy to somebody just because what? They didn't realize they needed to be in that lane and they took a chance. I mean, yes, it's really a problem if it's very, very dangerous and you almost got killed. I get it. But most of the time, that's not it. It's just, I don't want you in front of me kind of a thing. So when your automatic reaction is to go to this negative place like that, then that is going to play out in every single aspect of your life. And this week is an opportunity for you to really take a hard look at whether or not that is keeping you from moving forward in your own goals. And since you're Virgos, anything keeping you from moving forward in anything has got to go, right? That's all there is to it. It's got to go, because we're Virgos. We're going to keep moving forward no matter what gets in the way, right? I look at being tough and focused and moving forward as not, and I'm going to run over whoever gets in my way. More, I'm going to use my bubble, and my bubble will help them to make the choice to get out of my way rather than doing it in a very pushy way, because a lot of times that will bounce back at you. And you don't want that to happen either. So very good opportunity, actually, for you to evaluate your own self-talk, because honestly, when you take 24 whole hours to really pay attention to that, you would not believe how bad your own internal communication really is. And you want to know that because it may be holding you back. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And if you enjoy your horoscopes, please click the link below and send me a copy. I would really appreciate it. Moving on to Libra, no planets in Libra this week. Focus is on the home. We are moving into a Mercury retrograde this week. We have no planets coming into Libra to interact with that Mercury retrograde this week. So that's kind of cool. That does help. Doesn't mean that you won't be affected by it at all, but you may not be affected by it as much as the other signs. But it really also, with a Mercury retrograde, depends on you, and not so much what's influencing you. Because Mercury retrogrades really are all about showcasing the problems that we are allowing to get in our own way and sort of putting a neon light on them so that we can see it and deal with it. And a lot of problems that face most of us have to do with our own internal communication as well as our own external communication. One thing that I know about most of the Libras that I've met, which I've known quite a few of them, a lot of Libras have a really hard time being bold, being in charge, being the leader, so to speak. A lot of times, and a very common communication pattern actually that I've seen with most Libras is, if you want something, you go in, I'm going to go get that raise. And then you go in and it's like, you would want to give me a raise now, would you? Which is a form of communication that leaves the door wide open for them to say, absolutely, no, I don't want to give you a raise, right? Whereas if you came in and said, look, I've been here for so many years and I've been doing this, I feel that I deserve this much of a raise, let's negotiate, you might have a better chance of getting that raise than if you went in and said, you wouldn't want to do that for me, would you? So this is about toughening up your communication in many ways and about being blunt and direct, and you can still be blunt and direct with that beautiful Libra diplomacy that you've always had. You don't have to eliminate that. You don't want to go to the other end of the teeter-totter over here and just be rude about it either. It's about balance, Libras, right? Isn't it always about balance and making sure that you're using both sides all the time? So I feel like this week, there's a couple of things going on. First of all, with focus on home, that has a lot to do with the people in your home, but it also, there is an element of having the time to be able to focus on some of those projects that you've been wanting to get to at home, and maybe even enjoying a little bit of time at home, which is always nice to do. Also this week though, I really feel that it's important to pay attention to the communication patterns around you and the people that are closest to you, because these are where the communication issues are going to come up a whole lot, because you sort of get stuck in communication patterns throughout certain relationships that seem stuck and they never want to move or change or anything. These things are going to come up way more often because we're moving into a Mercury retrograde. So being aware of your communication problems, not the other person's. Okay, can't do anything about the other person's, but the way you communicate that's holding you back in some way, or that person isn't understanding what you're saying. It's up to you to look at what you're trying to say and word it in a way that that person will understand it. That way, and in some cases, it's got to have a bit of a direct punch to it. Otherwise, they're really not going to understand it. I always think that when you listen with your ears, you don't understand as much or as well as you do when you listen to with your heart. When you listen with your heart, you feel what that person is saying, and you can feel where they're coming from. And there is a difference between how an individual takes the information, depending on whether they're listening with their ears or they're listening with their heart. And you want to learn heart communication through this so that these people have a better understanding of where you're coming from, if that makes sense. So that is what I have for you guys this week. If you love your horoscopes, click the link below and send me a copy. I greatly would appreciate it. Moving on to Scorpio, we have no planets in Scorpio this week either. Focus is on those you love this week. And we are in a Mercury retrograde. It is true. And with focus on focus on those you love during a Mercury retrograde, what exactly is that going to look like? Well, let me just put it in these terms. The people that we love, we don't regret loving them. Well, sometimes we do. But for the most part, I'm talking about your family. And most of the time, we love having them around. And sometimes they get on our flippin' nerves. I mean, like, why does this person always choose to do this at this time right now? And I actually have a really easy example that most mothers with small children, unless they're perfect and Mary Poppins, would understand. It's the daily battle of getting the kids ready for school in the morning. And every morning you go through the same routine with this one kid. You go in there and you say, come on, it's time to get up. You got to go to school. And they go, and then you go back 2 minutes later and they're still in bed. Hey, you got to get up. You got to go to school. And they go, and then 3 or 4 times later, they finally get out of bed and you got to tell them, hey, you got to go put your shoes on. Hey, you got to do your breakfast. And you do this every single time until at the end of it, you just lose your flipping mind as you're walking out the door screaming, right? We've all been there. Okay. We've all been there. The kid is now used to this pattern because you do it every single day and you haven't changed it without fail. It's the same routine every single day. And this is a kid and you're the adult. So many times we hear in our heads going, oh my God, when is this kid going to grow out of this? It's the parent's job to teach the kid, right? And even though the kid is, being kind of a pain in the butt. And sometimes there's nothing you can do about that. It is still your job as the parent to find a way to change this pattern. So instead of starting off with waking them up 4 times before they finally get out of bed, you find a different way to wake them up. Maybe going in there with a boombox, with the absolute worst thing that they're going to hate that you can possibly think of, blasting, because they're not going back to sleep with that, right? And then getting up and telling them, look, you got 5 minutes to eat that breakfast, and if you don't, guess you're going to school without breakfast, so you better hurry up. Taking yourself out of the argument with the child is actually going to change the way that they react to the whole situation. And then you open the door to be able to find a solution for something that has become a problem and needs to stop being a problem. And sometimes you got to get creative, right? One of my absolute favorite stories of parenting was this kid that was just having all kinds of attitude problems, all kinds of problems at school. The parents were like, okay, you're grounded and we're only required to give you food and that's it. So they took the door from his room. He had plain food. It was all good food, of course, but it was plain food, nothing fancy. They took every electronic out of his room. This was a kid that had time to sit and think about the issues that he was having. And then, of course, left the door open for him to talk about solutions to these problems with his parents. It was actually one of the most brilliant stories I ever heard, and it worked out very good. Sometimes you just got to get creative, right? And all of our relationships are just like that. You have to get creative. You have to try something different. If you keep having the same conversation with somebody, you have to change the conversation. You can't expect other people to do it because you're giving them your power, and who wants to do that? So that's what I have for you guys this week. If you love your horoscopes, please click the link below in the description and send me a copy. I would really appreciate it. And we are moving on to Sagittarius. And speaking of coffee, Mm. Mm-mm-mm. Focus continues to be on your day-to-day schedule this week. This is pretty much the last week of that, actually, and then we're going to move on to a different focus. No planets moving into Sagittarius this week at all. So yay for that. We are in a Mercury retrograde. We are starting the Mercury retrograde this week. It is in Taurus, so there have been no planets in Sagittarius. It's difficult to, have a lot of focus on that Mercury retrograde, as in not being directly affected by it because of planets that are in your sign. Does not mean that you will not be affected by it. And with focus on your day-to-day schedule, you definitely want to leave room for cancellations, people changing appointments on you, maybe even having to juggle your schedule around because people are changing things on you. So little frustrations like that. And, it just takes a few little frustrations to turn into one great big giant frustration. And we're talking about Sagittarians here. You guys are really good at brushing it off until it gets to a certain point, and then it becomes this blow in order to release all that frustration, and then you're happy and you can move on. Just make sure you're not blowing it at other people. That's always where the problem starts, right? We want to avoid that problem as much as possible. Because Mercury is retrograde also, you want to make sure that you can avoid as many of these reschedulings or cancellations as much as possible by making sure that your communication is very clear and to the point as much as possible. A lot of times, if your communication isn't direct and to the point, and I don't mean blunt and I don't mean rude. Hold on. What I mean by clear and direct communication is making sure that there's no loopholes that are left open for somebody to interpret what you're saying in a different way than how you mean it, as much as possible. So if you need something done, for example, and you go to an employee, right? You don't necessarily tell your employee, hey, could you get these done if you like? Because obviously that leaves them open to say, well, I didn't like doing it today, so I chose not to do it today, right? And you wouldn't go to your employee and say that anyways. You would go to your employee and say, hey, I need these done by 5, right? So, and make sure they know that there is a clear deadline that these things need to come back on. So you also want to make sure that you're leaving that, making sure that there is no other interpretation of what you said. It just is what it is. And you especially need to do that in terms of, when you're talking to doctors' offices and anything that's going to directly impact your schedule, if that makes sense. The other thing that I really see coming up for you guys is because we're moving into focus being on those you love. And so I feel like family is going to come in and take a really big role in this challenge with the Mercury retrograde as well. And of course, with any Mercury retrograde and within our family relationships, relationships have communication problems. Every single one of them does. It's a good opportunity for you to identify your communication issues that might need to be tweaked or fixed a little bit. We tend to focus a lot of our energy on everybody else's problems and not focusing any energy on our own. And that's, of course, where we screw up every single time. You have no control over anybody else. You only have control over you. So this is a really good opportunity. If you're seeing these negative communication patterns coming up a lot, you might want to mirror that back to yourself just to make sure that you're not using those patterns in inappropriate ways yourself ways that are not helpful or not helping you get where you need to go, if that makes sense. So that is what I have for you guys this week. If you love your horoscopes, click the link down in the description below and send me a copy. I would greatly appreciate it. Moving on to Capricorn, this is our last week focused on relationships. Of course, we continue to have Pluto in there. Pluto is technically in Aquarius, but right on the cusp. So that influence continues in Capricorn as well. Pluto is in a square with the Sun and Jupiter, which is a little bit interesting because the Sun and Jupiter are very much focused in your career right now, and Pluto is focused on relationships. Capricorns are always career-driven people, and don't let anything get in the way of the sight of what I want, basically. I want that money, I want that money, I want that money. And are usually pretty good about not allowing anybody else to come in and infiltrate that. However, we all have those people, right, that do come in and infiltrate that every now and then, and therefore may cause a bit of a difficulty or create a bit of an obstacle between what you want to do, what you need to do, and you, if that makes sense. So there's a couple of things coming up with this. One, I sort of do feel like this may be coming up because somebody has been trying to get your attention and you've been so focused on your goals that you're just not giving them the attention they need. And that's why they're getting so in your face about it, if that makes sense. So with that being said, one thing that will maybe help with that a little bit is to set aside some time for them to help them with whatever it is that they need in a time that works for you as much as you can, if that makes sense. The other thing that I kind of feel is coming up around this is that it's highly possible that you want to make sure that you are forming the correct types of relationships you need to support your career goals. In some cases, this does look like individuals that are coming in that look like they're supporting you, but really they're not. They're actually trying to keep you from getting that job that they want. So you want to, of course, be mindful of that. Being a Capricorn, I'm sure you already are mindful of that. So that is good. Pluto's trine with Venus is very helpful because Venus adds this sort of creative energy towards your support system. And so it's almost like it's providing people to, there that are supportive of you, especially when you're looking at someone who may not be as supportive as they say they're being, if that makes sense. Also, Pluto is your source of power, and it's all about transformation and growth in many ways. When it's squared with Jupiter, which is the planet of growth, it feels like it's hindering your growth in some way. And with Mercury being retrograde right now, it just feels like it's going to create some obstacles between you and what you want. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to get them. It means that it's going to slow things down. So patience really is the word for the week, especially this week as we start this Mercury retrograde process. The more patience you have, the easier it is going to be for you in the long run. So that is what I have for you guys this week. If you love your horoscopes, click the link below and send me a copy. I would greatly appreciate it. And I'm going to move on to Aquarius. We, of course, have Pluto in Aquarius in a square with the Sun and Jupiter. The Sun and Jupiter are focused on career. Pluto is focused on relationships. We're moving into a Mercury retrograde. Just all kinds of stuff going on. And the Mercury retrograde is in Taurus, so it's in another fixed sign, which means that any planets that move into can very easily move into a square with that Mercury retrograde while it's happening. Luckily, we're going to kick off the week. Oh no, we're not kicking off the week with the moon. We ended the week last week with the moon, so that's not going to happen, but it will happen in a few weeks. That's in a few weeks. We don't have to worry about that, right? Couple of things that sort of jump up and come out of this square with Jupiter, because we're talking about our relationships kind of getting in the way of our career goals. Now, that plays out in a million different ways. It has been playing out for me lately. And the way that it's been playing out for me lately is less about them not allowing me to do what I want to do, but making decisions that I don't care for, that I'm using as an excuse to not focus on my own stuff, if that makes sense. And if that is you, it's time to stop. My guides told me it was time to stop. I think it's time for all of us to stop, really. I can tell you right now with certainty that it's not helping me move forward. It's not helping me move forward in my career goals or any of the things that I want to do. It's actually hindering me from doing pretty much everything. So, yeah, if you're doing that, you should probably stop doing that. Especially because Mercury is moving retrograde this week. So a lot of the problems that you've been having are going to be accentuated and much bigger because of the Mercury retrograde. So really, I have this sneaking suspicion, and I've been having this sneaking suspicion all last year as I was watching Pluto about to move into Capricorn, that one of the things that Aquarians are really going to go through in the next 20 to 25 years, because that's how long Pluto's going to be there, is the transformation that we've been waiting for. But also, it's sort of in here, bumps in and says, why have you been waiting? You could have done this whole time. You didn't really need my influence. His influence comes in to sort of force us to finally do what we were supposed to do in the first place, which is conquer the world and make it a better place, right? That's always what it's about. Pluto's trine with Venus is actually is pretty interesting as well. Venus putting her beautiful, loving, and creative energy into your support system. Aquarian, an individual Aquarian and support system. We all need a support system. Okay. People think we're aliens. We're not really aliens. We're not loners. We don't prefer to be shut up in a room with nobody there. We do need a support system. If you are one of those Aquarians that thinks that you don't, that might be something that you're going to be working on this week a little bit. Only because no individual person can do everything on their own. Trust me on this, okay? Doesn't matter how brilliant we are, we still don't know everything, right? So that sort of lineup does create this layer of a support system and exactly the type of support that you need. And when it's, of course, a trine, that means it's lined up with another air sign. So while Venus is kind of an emotional sign, there's a brilliance to that, if that makes sense. So I see that as really having these intellectuals coming together specifically for a cause, which is awesome. And if you're having trouble in one area, focus your energy on a different area for now, rather than keep trying to push through something that's frustrating you. Which of course we all know doesn't really work out very well. So that's what I have for you guys this week. If you really enjoy your horoscopes, click the link below and send me a copy. I would certainly appreciate it. And finally, we're moving on to Pisces. We are kicking off the week with the moon in Pisces in a grand trine with Saturn, because of course he comes in conjunction with Saturn. So Saturn is definitely a part of this grand sextile, as well as the sun, I'm sorry, Mercury and Uranus and Mars. Now, Mars is still focused on inner trauma. And while we've talked before about how that doesn't quite seem helpful, and this trine is going to continue between Saturn and Mars all week long. It may not seem helpful, but honestly, releasing our inner anger towards various different situations, when we're holding on to anger, we're holding ourselves back at the same time, because that anger is constantly an anchor that's keeping you in the same place. And Saturn is all about responsibility and pointed right at your finances right now. And we're in a Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrogrades bring up financial issues that you need to get past in order to grow financially. So all of this is lining up right now, and it may feel like it's lining up in one of those ways where it's just beating the crap out of you. But sometimes that's how rough it has to get in order for us to take a step back and stop pointing the finger at everybody else and look at our own problem, right? What am I doing to get in my own way? It always comes back to that. It always comes back to self-reflection, because you have control over you. You have control over what you accomplish. You have control over your money and whether or not you make money. When you put that control in somebody else's hands, you're putting yourself in a victim space. And when you put yourself in a victim space, nothing good ever comes of it. So, and all of these planets, of course, lined up with Mercury and Uranus right at the beginning of the week, not so much at the end of the week when Mercury goes retrograde. So that does kind of help a little bit, even if it's a positive aspect. Mercury and Uranus focus on your career goals as well as your support system. So there's a lot going on right there. Bottom line, though, is that when it comes to your support system, specifically with financial support, it's not just about having support. It's about having the right type of support. It's making sure that if you are not really great about budgeting money, that you go to somebody who can help you with that, right? Just because you don't know how to do it doesn't mean that there isn't somebody out there that can do it, that can help you with it. So again, success is all about making the right decisions. It's about making the right choices. And it's about stepping out of that I'm the victim of this situation kind of a thing, if that makes sense. We do have Mars in a square with Venus. Venus is focused on your support system. So this may be why you need to find the right type of support. Maybe you have somebody that's supposedly there to support you, but they're really not there to support you. It's like a family member who's like, oh yeah, I'm going to help you with that, and then goes and spends all your money, right? That's really frustrating. And rather than just focusing on the fact that that person isn't supporting you, you need to look elsewhere to find the person that can support you in whatever your goals are, if that makes sense. So is Mercury going to come in and get retrograde and make this a little bit more complicated? Absolutely. Doesn't he always? But sometimes those complications are exactly what we need to just be done dealing with the same situation over and over and over again. And that's really what it's all about. So that is what I have for you guys this week. And that is what I have for everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out and enjoying the horoscopes. If you enjoyed your horoscopes, there's a link down there in the description. Send me a coffee. I would greatly appreciate it. You know how much I love my coffee. Mm. Again, I am Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. Thanks so much for hanging out this week, and I will see you guys next week. Make it a great week, everybody. Mercury retrograde or not, make it a great week. It's in your power.